Hello and welcome to episode 4 of Live, Laugh, Love Real Estate, conversations with Lisa Loveland and Kosta Hantzis. Thank you for joining. This episode, we are going to talk about what is actually involved in the real estate agent's job. I think so many times we don't do a good job of explaining that, and it's understandable. You hired us to make this process seamless and take away all the pressure and the stress and the emotion. So I don't necessarily want to come back and tell you everything I'm doing. But it is important to set the precedent up front and to let people know what you're doing, not to look like, oh, look at me, aren't I fantastic? But to set the appropriate expectation for your clients so that at the end of the transaction, they feel that there's been a tremendous value add. Because there is a tremendous value add. As I said in the last probably couple episodes, whatever you're paying your agent, 5-6% commission, doesn't all go to the agent, goes to the company. There's a lot of ways that gets cut up. So never count your agent's money. You've hired them before the transaction started. You knew what to expect. So don't negotiate at the end of a deal just because you're not getting the price you want, or you ended up spending more if you're a developer, spending up more than you thought you would, and all of a sudden you dip into the pockets of your agent. Not a great way to do business.
No.
And just kind of walk that back and see how that feels. You've been doing this process, you are in a trusting relationship, and are you splitting the proceeds of your sale with the agent? So, feel comfortable that you're getting a value add, but don't go in a negotiation and ask your agent to kick in money. I do it sometimes just to get a deal done, but it never leaves a good taste in anyone's mouth. So one of the things that an agent is hired to do is to set appropriate expectations, to manage the process so that we're 5 steps ahead of something that may, go off the rails. 9 times out of 10, a real estate deal goes smoothly. But when it doesn't, it goes south pretty quickly. So it's really good to have a team of trusted advisors from your lenders and your attorneys and the other agents that you're dealing with so that things go smoothly and everyone is reasonable and rational when and if things don't. So on a listing side, our responsibility is to cover all of the market analytics. And statistics can kind of show anything if you know how to work them. So you don't want to do that. You want to understand what your client is looking for. You want to come up with the stats, and then you want to look at the property specifically to see its pros, its cons. What kind of profile of a buyer do you think you're going to be marketing this towards? And then you need professional photographers. You need great floor plans, and you need to have it exposed everywhere. So we're really marketers, not sales agents.
Absolutely.
Our job is to manage the emotions, set the expectations, make sure that everyone is, especially in the COVID environment, safe. Nothing is missing from your home. And we have all the avenues to get you advertised 24/7 until the house sells. The difficulties can come in when you get to the point of negotiation, and you've got to get, as we've said before, win-win deals. The buyers have to be happy, the seller has to be happy, and that doesn't mean that somebody walks away thinking they just got, hosed.
Right.
There's always going to be problems that happen if that's the case. As we've said before, everyone eventually is going to have a voice.
Yep.
So we want those voices to be heard throughout the transaction so that we don't have any surprises, partway through.
Absolutely. I think, and when you were saying that, the kind of biggest thought I got is when we first met, and you came into where I was working, the first impression I got is there's, of course, as we talked about before in the other episodes of like reality TV, there's a stigma attached to real estate agents and the business as a whole, which you just said that non-zero sum, or I forget the zero sum game, or somebody has to lose, somebody has to win. That's kind of what you would think going into real estate. And of course, that's more for reality TV, as we talked about in the last episode. Mm-hmm. That's not really, especially nowadays where information is so readily available and people are always being filmed. Everything's kind of, it's tougher to get away with things that you might have got with past, saying different things, especially now that everybody's recording. One of the things too, I think our office talked about is people in their house when they have like security cameras and different things like that. A lot of the times people, Alexa, they're recording your conversations you have in their house.
Yeah.
So you may be doing an open house at their listing or whatever you're doing somewhere, and they're recording the conversation. You might say something that you don't want to say, and then next you know it, the next day they mention something like, how do they know that? It's just a different thing. Luckily that's never happened. I don't think we would never say anything bad, of course, too, but you really got to be, and the big thing too is when I was saying I first met you is I got initially, and this is a big thing a lot of people say, is we're not selling houses necessarily, is we're selling trust. And
right.
when I definitely first met you, I got that initial impression is like, okay, this person's trustworthy. They seem to genuinely care about the clients, and you bring the clients in because we're the ones talking about the clients. The clients want the apartment. For example, what it was, they came in wanting that apartment, and it was up to you to handle the back end, to talk with me who weren't there to figure out how we're going to make this work. Sure, your clients probably came back and said, okay, we want this and that, but you have to take their information of what they're saying and then say it usually in a better way. Sometimes clients and anybody in general can come back and say things in more of a harsh way. But if you come at the person that has the information, has what you want in a harsh way, probably not going to get what you want, or at least leave that sour taste in your mouth, as you were mentioning before.
Right. And a lot of times, all of the time, it's so important for us to be able to manage our clients, whether they're buyers or sellers. And I don't mean that in a controlling way, just because it's best for everyone if if expectations are set appropriately.
Yep.
That deal that we had, that was a little inappropriate for me to have to come back and ask that. And we don't like being put in those situations, but we do represent our clients. It was my responsibility to do that. And that's when it's very important in how I relay that information to you. If I come to another agent and ask for something that's way out there, they're going to look at me like I'm crazy.
Yeah.
And then I've just lost my credibility. But if I go in and explain with still keeping my fiduciary responsibility to my client, what's happening, and could you please do this and see where it goes, then your unrealistic ask sometimes is a little bit softened.
Right.
And that was one of the reasons I was so impressed with you, because you took it back and you did get it done. And they ended up never moving forward with it.
That's the funniest part of it.
That was the funniest part. They kind of went dark. We never heard from them again.
That was a crazy event.
So that's sometimes what happens in real estate too. So be kind to us real estate agents. We get beat up out there. All kinds of things can happen, and people can disappear. That really doesn't happen that often.
No.
But
sometimes.
But emotions in this process get heated. That's another role that we find ourselves slipping into, is the counselor, the friend, the you have to listen. You have to listen. I don't mean that it's a chore, but you do. You have to listen.
Yeah.
And you have to de-escalate. People get nervous. It's a lot of money. There's change that's going on in their life. They could be going through a divorce. They could be just getting married and moving in together. We talked earlier, all those changes, whether they're good or bad, they're still stressful.
Yes, definitely.
And all of that comes out in these kind of transactions. So when you're buying, everybody's, as soon as you start to look in the market, everybody has an opinion. If it's parents or friends,
the
crazy uncle.
He's all of a sudden a real estate agent.
He's all of a sudden a real estate agent.
They always come up with the funniest thing too. They're always just like at a family get together would be like, oh, like on that too. Oh, how much did you? They'll sneak in the questions, and they'll be like, then all of a sudden at the next family gathering, they'll have like an analysis of it, be like, oh yeah, you kind of, are you sure you should have paid that much for that? Whatever it is, a car. Oh, you could have done it that way. The construction's a big one too. Oh, you could have hired this person. Oh, you overpaid for it, and it's just like, oh God.
Yeah, and especially if they're not familiar with the area. You paid how much for a parking space? Your mother and I bought our first house for that.
That's the big one.
And understandably so. If you're moving here from somewhere in the Midwest and you're looking at these housing prices, my God, why wouldn't you fall off your seat?
Yeah, that's true.
But it is what it is. And if you want to get in the game, then you have to pay those prices. So it's really, again, important to have a good real estate agent, to have a good attorney, to have a good lender, who all are familiar with the local market.
Absolutely. I think the lender is and the biggest question too is people get as this whole episode's geared to is, what do real estate agents actually do? Because on the surface level, my friends ask me to, or the biggest question is like, they see us doing different things, marketing, they see us, the podcast, they see just different things. And it's like, what do you guys actually do? And I think the big question is everybody thinks what real estate agents do is just find properties, especially for clients. Just if they're looking on market, of course, it's just go out and look at the inventory on MLS and find you a property. And if you don't find them a property, sometimes it's like, this is how I've heard stories too about clients and different things like that, of people being like, oh, like I found another person actually found me this listing, or I found this somewhere, or some other agent, all of a sudden some other person that you've never heard about, you've been helping this person out for a while, comes into the process and says, oh, like, they actually found me something, we're gonna moving forward with that. They say in a polite way usually, but it's like, wait, what? Another person did what? Another agent you're working with? Like I wasn't
right.
I think that goes back to the big thing is it's tough to do is the expectations from the beginning.
Right.
It's tough to sit down with somebody. You don't want to be the first meeting you meet somebody, and as you've talked about a lot to me, is you kind of want to get somebody in the door and get them out, showing them properties before you sit down with them. And this is like the traditional teachings of like asking them 10, 20 questions. Nobody wants to sit down the first time I'm meeting you. It's like, what is this? Okay, if that does that, what is that? What is that? And oh, if you do this, and how about that? Or what is your range for this? And it's like 20 questions. And then
they're just wondering, oh my God, when's this meeting going to end? All I wanted to do was go look at some houses. No, you're absolutely right. So our job is to coordinate everything, basically.
Right.
We can refer home inspectors, good lenders, good attorneys. You know, sometimes attorneys can blow deals because they want to uncover a problem to resolve it, to justify, you know, the charges. And, you know, I always say we don't need heroes in real estate. We just need consistency and rational minds. So we do that. We uncover not the properties, because as we've said before, you can find properties online. We can find you off-market stuff if you'd like. But for the most part, we're there to develop your strategy. You know, how are you going to get a winning offer? You know, what are you looking for? What if, you know, and you have to be honest with us. This is on the buy side. You know, if you can spend, you know, $1 million, then we need to be looking in this market at things that are less than $1 million, because you're going to have to, you know, be in some pretty competitive bidding situations where things will go over. And these conversations are so important to have before you actually go out. And I always say that if I haven't had a chance to go out with someone and explain this, I can do it on the phone. People don't need to come in and sit and talk with me for an hour, because I wouldn't like that either. But I do like to get all of this information out first. We send them, you know, we have brochures, we have bios, we have everything on the team. So before I'm even meeting with you, you know exactly who I am from the resume standpoint. And I think that's helpful. I think it frees up time to actually talk about the buyer and their needs versus sitting there and telling them, you know, what award I've gotten and how much production I do. And you need to know that, because you need to understand that we're good at what we do, but it doesn't need to be all about me. So it's really fantastic to get that stuff out of the way. And then we sit and we talk over the phone, or I usually don't do any of that stuff in email or text. It's really important to be on the phone or be in person. I mean, the last year it's been kind of tough to be in person, but if you can be in person, that's great. And I'll do it in my car. I usually don't have somebody come and sit in my office. We just go. And then we start, and you're kind of in your natural environment there and theirs, and you get, you know, natural conversation going back and forth, so it doesn't feel, you know, stressful or orchestrated. And they get a sense of me, and I get a sense of them. And I don't sign contracts on buyers. And I've always felt uncomfortable with it. I know a ton of people do, but I just don't, always on a listing, obviously. But with buyers, I always say, you know what, you've got to trust me, I've got to trust you, and you've got to be able to have open communication. And if there's something I'm not doing, that I want you to tell me. And if it's not a fit, if it's not a chemistry, it's okay. And I may feel the same way with my buyer client, and it's okay to part ways, because the bottom line is, if I have to get you to sign a contract with me that you're going to be loyal, I don't know. That doesn't feel good to me.
No.
Am I really going to spend money litigating if you don't follow through on that contract?
Good luck with that.
Yeah, and it's just like, you know, there's better ways to spend your time. So I just say it's a handshake. And we need to communicate openly. You need to feel comfortable. And I won't even ask you to work with me exclusively if you don't feel comfortable until we've gone out 3 times. But until we've gone out 3 times, after we've gone out 3 times, then I would ask for a verbal exclusive commitment. And that gives you an idea as to how serious the buyers are as well. Because sometimes people can, go dark and you don't know why, and it's because they've gone, to another realtor, or they thought they'd get a better deal by going direct to the listing agent. So they're a little embarrassed, to return the communications. That is also, a kind of not really how things work. You can go directly to the listing agent, but that contract and that commission has already been signed up and agreed to.
Yep.
Before that property even went on the market. So it doesn't cost a buyer anything to have buyer representation. So you're either, the whole commission goes to the list side and you have no representation, or the seller pays half to the buyer agent, half to the seller agents. It's the same amount of money is coming out of the seller's pocket. It's just either going to one company or 2. And it's either going, you have no representation, or you have representation. So it's kind of a no-brainer to
I think it is.
To have a buyer agent represent you.
I think the issue is with that, and 2 points off of that, but the first one being is sometimes people who are, depending on what profession they're in, especially if they're in a sales position and they're used to doing this kind of negotiation necessarily for not real estate, but maybe for a different field of business, they feel as though they may know everything when it comes to negotiating sales and offers and different things like that. And they maybe feel as though they don't need a real estate agent, and they try to do it themselves. And a lot of the times, as we found out, because that people do that and then they come back and say, okay, we tried this and it didn't work. Especially nowadays in the market, that's tough to compete if you don't really know. I could be well-versed in the sales of motor vehicle. I could be well-versed in the sales of Jeeps, let's say, for example. But that doesn't mean I know anything about real estate in the process.
Right.
Which doesn't make sense to me why somebody wouldn't be at least. And I think the big thing is respect and communication is definitely the big thing too. It's if I hire you, for example, I'm not here to overlook you the entire time. If you're going out there and you're helping us out, say you're our agent, helping out, and everything's going smoothly, everything's going great, there's no issues. If there is an issue that comes up, it gets resolved, then there's no reason to be on top of that person. Let them do their thing. Maybe if you're a client and you notice that your agent's slacking, or you feel as though then that's a different story. But if they're doing a good job, just let them do their thing.
Yeah.
And if issues arise, then say something. It's the same thing in a relationship too, as we talked about in the last episode. You don't need to make problems that aren't there if everything's just going great.
Right. And people get nervous, when there's that, when there's a silence or there's a pause.
Oh yeah.
So they need to fill it with something. And so they start asking questions, and then it can go down the wrong road. So, it helps for us to be pushing the process along. So you don't, I'm not saying that you have to talk through the entire time, but there need to be, foreseeable steps. This is what we're doing, and this is the next step. And after that, we're going to do this.
Yep.
So they already know what's coming.
Exactly.
Because when you don't know something, it causes you to be fearful if you don't know what's next, especially when you are in something like this where it's such a large expenditure.
Yeah.
And it's such a big decision. Where you're going to live is a really big decision on so many levels. From a budgeting, we all live on monthly payments. So it's, $25,000 to a seller is a big deal. $25,000 over a 30-year mortgage is not as big a deal. And it's important we can't change the way buyers or sellers think, but it's an important thing to let someone know. That I always say, put together your best, when we have a best and final, put together your best and final. And that number has to be that you can put your head at, you can sleep at night if we win, and you can sleep at night if we lose. Because to get into some kind of strategy of, what do you think the next buyer is going to bid, and what do you think the seller bought it years ago for X amount of money. He or she is making a fortune. Well, that doesn't matter. If I bought Google stock, for $25, am I going to sell it to you for $30 when it's trading where it is right now?
Right.
No, it's going to trade at the market value. So the sellers are going to get what the market's going to bear, and what the market bears is what buyers are willing to spend. So they don't have a control over that. We need to figure out what offer is going to win from its terms and from its price. And then I just lost my train of thought.
I think you were saying there, just one thing off of that is the whole idea of the common thing is, and buyers especially saying anything too, is like, I want to get a good deal.
Okay. Well, okay.
Is it a good deal though? Is this a good deal? And
right.
Things like that. I don't want to like overpay. I want this to be a great deal. And we get it, but what are your thoughts on that when somebody says?
Whenever I talk about buyers, I have so many thoughts. That's why I lose my train of thought, because it all depends on what part of the process we're in. So getting a good deal, and I hate to say this, but God, it's relative, right? I mean, $1,200 a square foot, is that a good deal? Well, yeah. If, you could, it was $1,400 a square foot. It all depends on what market you're in, what the competition is. But I think right now, everything is a quote good deal just to get an offer accepted because interest rates are so low. Oh, that's what it was. I was going back to monthly payments. That the $25,000 is a huge thing for a buyer. I mean, rather for a seller, and that difference in a monthly payment isn't that big. So when you're going in to make these offers, try not to think about the $25,000. Think about the amount of money you're paying monthly that would be extra, and it's really not going to be that much. And if you put your bottom line down, you know what it is, you can sleep at night, then you just have to be okay with that, whether you get it or you don't. And as far as going back to your question about a good deal, for the most part, real estate's always going up. So even if it doesn't look like it's a deal right now, wait a few months. And in this market, you'll see that you did get a good deal. Wait a few years, and you'll even be happier.
I think it all, as you say too, is, are you selling? When you just buy something, get fixation. This is probably going to be the next episode or the one after we talk about what not to do after you buy a home. But The whole idea of, people get fixated with the price they paid. Next year, the home values went down. Next year, they're up. I made money. Well, it's like the same thing with stocks. I was having this conversation with my friends, and it's so like prevalent on the media too. They talk about like Jeff Bezos' net worth and Elon Musk's net worth. They don't just have billions of dollars like in their pocket or in the bank account. It's tied up in stocks. They have to sell the stocks to then actually have that money. They don't have that money. It's the same thing with real estate. If you have a bunch of real estate investment properties, your money's in their investment properties. You're not getting money unless it cash flows. You're having that as money to spend. But if it's not cash flowing, when you own a bunch of real estate, you don't necessarily just have, your net worth could be huge, like $20 million, because you have a bunch of real estate that's worth $20 million. But that doesn't mean you have $20 million where you can just spend and give out to people, which is, especially now in the whole like Robinhood stuff like that with Dogecoin, the cryptos and stuff like that. It's like, you're up that much, but you don't have that money to spend. You may be worth $100,000 in stock, but that's not until you sell the actual stock.
That's right. That's why I love, anyone who knows me knows I love real estate for income producing assets, because it gives you both. It'll throw an income stream monthly, and you pay down your debt, and then when you're ready to retire, you've got property you can cash out on, or you have that income stream. Right.
That's what I think, I don't know if we talked about this in the first episode, but in terms of investment properties, but that's what my grandparents did. They came over from Greece with, as I used to joke around with, I thought it was a different story, but my mom clarified it wasn't the case. But I thought they came over with like suitcases and stuff like that on like the boat or whatever. But they actually had like maybe a duffel bag. I think it actually was. They came over with nothing. I think she said they had like maybe $1,000, and that's it between the two of them. And they worked in factories until they could afford to, I think it was actually my grandmother, Yaya is what it says in Greek, is like the right word, but she, for some reason, loved real estate, or just like was really into it. Somebody would have said something to her like, hey, you should get into real estate. So instead of doing the whole roast beef shop or sandwich shop Greek way of doing it, like some of the family did that, or people we meet have like as you always see, there's Kosta's roast beef, or there's Charlie's roast beef, a bunch of Greek names for the roast beef, because that's just what they did. They came over and their family started that. But some of the family, and my family specifically, everybody we don't own any restaurants anymore, but everybody in our family took to buying real estate. So they worked in factories, saved up enough money until they could buy a 3-family, moved into one of the units in the 3-family, rented out the other 2. They fixed up the one they were in, and they would move to the different ones.
Yeah.
And then when they saved up enough and they got enough cash flow, and they would just buy a different one. And over the years, you repeat that, as you just said. Now you have properties that are paid off,
Right.
and you can pass on to the next generation in terms of, that's the best way I think is, I hope to do someday to my kids, of course, is pass them on something that's producing cash. So my grandmother always said, don't sell the cow, which is one of my favorite lines. So like, you're right. Yeah.
That's true.
Don't want to sell the cow.
Yeah, I don't like, I get attached to everything. I can't sell. But anyway, that was my plan even before I realized I get attached to everything and can't sell. But I'm all for that as a retirement plan, as income producing assets. And it's fun. You get to, it gives you projects, gives you income.
Yeah.
And gives you security.
I think it's fun, definitely. The whole, as we talked about it before in the last episode about stocks, like, of course, don't invest into anything that you aren't familiar with. But real estate, I just like so much because you can see it, you can touch it, you can feel it. You could go renovate it, as you just said, put the work into it to say, okay, if I put this amount of work in and I spend $5,000 and I update the kitchen and bathroom, this should produce. That means I could charge this much more for rent, or when those tenants move out.
Right.
It's tough to raise the rent necessarily when tenants are there, and especially if they're good tenants, that's a different story. But just necessarily looking at the value of it by doing the work on it, you can see where your money's going to.
Right.
Stuff's going to happen, but...
And that brings us back to, that's why you need a good real estate agent. You don't need to know all of that unless it's your hobby. But if you are thinking of investing because you're nervous of the stock market, or you just want to divest your portfolio, which is always recommended, you should call us. It's one of the things we love doing, is figuring out investment plans. You don't have to have, one of the topics we were going to talk about was, you don't have to have $1 million to make $1 million in real estate. And we've done it with a lot of people that were just average people. And you get them into, I would put them into little, one beds and studios in the Fenway, when the Fenway was a little more reasonable. And, you've got an unbelievable rental market because of the universities. And it was an affordable price point to get into. And then, depending on what your age is, by the time you're retired, you've got that paid off, and it does nothing but throw monthly income that you can rely on, that you don't have to worry about, what the government's going to do or what the stock market's going to do. It's nice to have a little bit of control over your financial future.
Yeah, and it's definitely not to say that just because we're in real estate, we're not just saying that real estate is always, you put your money into something, it's always going to be a great investment. Things can go wrong, things can go sideways.
Absolutely. That's why there's an R in real estate. There's a big risk.
Yeah.
But there's ways to level that out.
Right.
Again, you have to have someone who knows the market and knows where to put the money, where to put the improvements in, what your return's going to be.
Yep.
Again, there's never a crystal ball, but we can give you a pretty good idea as to where you want to be headed. Right. And how much something like that would cost.
You can't really do that with stocks. You have no control over what the company does, unless you're a
so
huge
much
investor
inside stuff
in it.
we don't know. Exactly.
I think one of the things too you were saying before, communication. We didn't really go into too much detail too about that. I think you did briefly, but another thing, as I look on forums and different things like that, like Reddit, I go on the different websites, and I like to hear from people just to say what are people saying the pros and cons are, what they didn't like about a real estate agent, what they didn't like about the process. And the big one I find is people say is communication.
Yeah.
I think you talked about it too, of not leaving people in the dark. You don't have to say like every second there is something goes on, you get an email, have to text the client, I just got an email saying this, or just got this saying that, but at least check in, hey, like say if there's like you're waiting on to hear something, be like, if you're not really sure, because like the seller maybe or whatever it is isn't going to know an answer for like a few days, and you're not really sure when they come back and tell you something, at least be okay, hey guys, like I'll check with you guys Tuesday morning at 8 a.m. or by Tuesday night at 8 a.m. whether or not we hear back from them, just so they know they're not waiting. And because the thing is, if you put yourself in the person's shoes, I like to do that too, and just figuring out like, hey, this person's buying $1 million house, they have a lot on the line here, they want to stay up. I would be like, okay, what is going on? I haven't heard from their agent, and that's what really gets rid of that whole idea of trust. If you're not communicating and just saying little updates here and there, go a long way, I find. Yeah,
and they don't feel like everyone needs to feel like they're our only client. And I hope so bad that you all feel like anyone we've worked with is our only client.
Yep.
Because I get it. I've bought and sold myself. And it's exciting. It's nerve-wracking. It's emotional. And if you're just kind of hanging out there on your own, or you feel like, they're working with someone else who has more money, that doesn't feel good. And we never want any of our clients to feel like that. So it's so important to tell people what you're going to do and then remind them of what you did, not in a, that's what I did, but just to let them know this is where we were going to go with, our offer. Now it's accepted, and here are our next steps. So they're prepared, and it gives them something to do other than to, get nervous.
Right. I like the whole idea when you said, and you've kind of taught me to do too, in terms of dealing with clients, is, hey, like, what is your bottom line here? What are you willing to spend? That way, as the agent, okay, this is as far as they can go. We're going to try to not get close to that. We're trying to maybe get as far away, but this is what we're working with here. That way you can be more strategic if your clients aren't communicating with you. And it goes both ways, was what I was going to say as well too. We as real estate agents should communicate with the clients, but our clients, it makes it a hell of a lot easier if you're communicating with us, at least giving your feedback, because we're worried too. We're like, it's more of a worry for me sometimes too, when I feel with the clients, especially too, is talking with them, or what are they thinking? I don't know what it is. I still get nervous about it too, about the whole idea of if I'm helping a client out, that they're going to go with somebody else for whatever reason. And it's not a confident thing. It's nothing to do with confidence. It has to do with more of the idea of, and I get stuck on the idea of the whole finding properties point. And that's why I asked you about that. It's like, okay, if they find something on their own, maybe, are they still going to go through me? Because sometimes I feel as maybe they found it. And I remind myself that we're not here just to find the property. We're here to make sure everything, as you said, buyer or renter, it doesn't cost you anything. So you might as well have somebody that at least you can trust and knows somewhat what they're talking. You don't have to be the biggest genius in the world as a real estate agent in every case. You want the best real estate agent you can, but at the very least, you want a real estate agent just to have a second pair of eyes to look over everything to make sure, okay, the paperwork, all the necessary paperwork's there. That's a big pain too. It's like, we as agents deal with all the paperwork. We have everything ready to go. We send it over to the client, say, we just need you to sign this, do that. It makes it a lot more easier and less stressful and time saver, especially. And we're negotiating not just on the price, but through home inspections, through, appraisals, through, if there's an assessment that needs to be done, there's so many different things that end up coming up that, all right, who's going to pay for that? The buyer or the seller? that becomes a part of the deal. Yeah. Past getting the offer accepted. And then I'm glad you brought up again the point of if they're finding their own properties. I think addressing that in the first conversation is really, really important because as we've said multiple times, that's not our value. And if we haven't said that, then it becomes somewhat competitive with our own client off the bat. Well, I better send them that before they find it themselves. No. We want this to be a team effort because so many times when they start sending you things of properties of interest, it isn't what they've told you initially was what they were looking for. I love it, and it happens more times than not. Especially if it's a couple, one person sending you one, the other person sending another, and they're different areas, it's different criteria. And it's a way to get all of this stuff out on the table so that we can, again, openly communicate. And you'll also find out where their price points are. And it goes back to, I don't think it's that they don't trust us. I think it's human nature that if I tell you what I'm going to spend, I'm going to be spending that. Right. So if I kind of hold a little bit back, maybe I'm going to get in at a better price. Well, here's the thing. You can do that, but you're not buying it from me, so I can't make a determination on what it sells for. But I can certainly put together a better strategy of offering and counter-offering if I know what your bottom number is. If we don't have that much room, then I've got to come up with a different strategy. If there's some room there, then I can work with that all day long based on I think you need to go back 3 times to get your best offer. I wouldn't go, and that's the only free tip I'm going to give right now. But you don't want to go back too many times. It's you want to pretty much get to whatever that number is with 3 go-arounds. Awesome. I think that pretty much covers all the bases on the different things. I think the communication, the trust was key. Definitely setting the expectations from the beginning. And this is a tip for not just us as agents or agents in general. This is a tip for people that are looking to buy or sell.
Yeah.
Set the expectations from the beginning, just so you know, okay, this is how it's going to work. If you see anything, send it to me. And the big thing too is I noticed is it's different when the real estate agent communicates with the listing agent, whether that's on a home, condo, a rental. Mm-hmm. I feel as though, and it could just be observations, but I feel as though agents treat the actual client differently. If you're going straight to them, they sometimes maybe will say, oh, or leave stuff on the market just so you can reach out to them and they can grab those people as a client, or say, oh, that one's actually taken, but we can bring you to somewhere else. But if a real estate agent, as we reach out to the other person, the agent on the property for our clients, they're a lot less willing to try to pull really any stunts, which is just unfortunate. It's the nature of the business too. People, it's still competitive. Don't get us wrong when we say win-win situations. It's still competitive, and we're still competitive. And the whole idea of the buyers not giving us the top amount because of, they do that, then you're gonna have to pay that much. But it's more, I know you from saying it too, and I know me. It's like if our client gives us, this is their top dollar and this is what they want to spend, the two different numbers, I'm going to try as hardest to get that, because I want to win for the client. To like, I want to go back to the client and have them satisfied and be like, we got as close to that. Like every negotiation I've had of anything is like, I want to make sure my client's happy and loves them, get as close to that number they want to spend as possible, because I want them to be satisfied. And
we want to stay in business. We don't want to just be around for a year or two. We want clients for life. And so when you have your principles and ethics and values aligned with that, it usually always works out, and people are happy. But you get tossed around a lot. Buyers, sellers, agents, everybody. It makes it exciting. It makes it fun. But there's definitely a lot of plates to keep up in the air.
Exactly. Well, I think that kind of gave a good insight, at least as best as possible. At least we talked about before on the podcast, of giving not necessarily specific examples. We can't talk about our clients and the negotiations with that, because that just can't do that. But we can give examples from a general broader perspective, and at least give some tips so you can watch this episode or any of the podcasts and be like, okay, they talked about that, and this is you can kind of get the gist of what we're saying. But as you said before too, if you have any specific questions, whatever they are, you're looking to buy, sell, or just curious about something, just don't hesitate to reach out, ask us any questions. You can follow us on Instagram at the Loveland Group. Everything's, of course, is in the links of everything, but it's just the Loveland Group on Instagram, the Loveland Group on Facebook. Our website is the Loveland, not the, but lovelandgroup.re.com. We have it in our background too right now.
I love it. You guys got to check out our website. It looks awesome.
Yeah, we forgot there's a TV to the left of me. I set up, I was like, oh, I'll have the TV as the website as the background, but I was like, wait, never mind. I have the camera set up this way, and it's not going to work out. But definitely check out the website. It does look good every time, especially on the big screen. It looks nice.
Oh, I love it. I know, it looks fantastic. Well, we are so glad you joined us for episode 4, and we will be back next week for episode 5, and it'll be a surprise as to what we talk about.
Thanks, everyone.